Hi everybody, it's Christy, your digital technology librarian, here with you with yet another Film Rec Friday. This week I was looking around at some of the different titles that we have available, and I really decided that it might be quite interesting to focus in on a topic that I've been fascinated by for ages, and that's fandoms. So fandoms are simply groups of fans of a topic in particular. A lot of times the connotations go with more geek-oriented topics, say like Star Trek, Star Wars, technology. But, fandoms can be for pretty much anything. And that's kind of the fun in delving into some of these films that I've selected for this week. So many different kinds of topics. And I think it does a really good job of exploring how anybody can be a fan of anything, of course, and how we shouldn't necessarily stereotype any of these people or any of these fandoms in general, simply because, again, anyone can be a fan of something. Um, so, as with every week, if you have a Milan-Berlin Library card, all of these picks are going to be available to you totally for free from one of our 3 video services, which are Cleveland's CleveNet Overdrive, Hoopla Digital, and then of course Canopy. So I hope you all enjoy, and without any further ado, let's get started on these recs. So, as always, our first recommendations are all going to come from CleveNet's Overdrive, and the very first one is a documentary based on what I would consider a topic traditionally thought of as more geeky, I suppose. And the documentary is called Jobs versus Gates, and it's all about Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and the origins of both Apple and Microsoft, and how the two rivalries sort of started out. Now, this documentary does an excellent job of sort of tracing the history of the personal computer in general. Definitely learned a ton when I was watching it, but it also really just sort of colors it with a lot of personality, simply because it really does explore how the two men approached the same issue of personal computers in physical homes across the country from such different angles, because they very, very much so had different ways to look at the same problem, and very different personalities. And you can see that from both archived footage, but also from interviews that they did with tons of people who worked with both men, and people who were really familiar with the tech realm at that time. Now, I really, really enjoyed this, if for no other reason than it makes the argument that one system is better than the other, that we're still having to this day, really kind of relevant. Um, there's a coworker that I have. We are constantly debating the efficacy of Apple versus Microsoft, even now. And we're people who've had computers since the early 90s. So it's the same debate that we've been having the vast majority of our lives. We still have the same debate about phones. Everyone does. iOS systems versus Android systems, and this sort of shows how, you know, it's not just lip service to say you're an Apple person or you're a Microsoft person. It really is how we look at the problem and how we want to approach the issue of how we interact with technology. And I think the documentary is really, really fun to watch in general. So please do, if you're interested in that particular time period or you're interested in computers or phones and tech in general, Jobs versus Gates, it's really fascinating and definitely worth a watch. So make sure you check it out. My second CleveNet Overdrive recommendation is for another documentary called Spellbound. Now, this one was really fascinating. It's quite old. It's from 2002, but I remember it being out at the time, but not having the chance to see it simply because it wasn't widely available. And now you can just click on your computer screen and there it is. So Spellbound follows a group of children who are all bound for the Scripps National Spelling Bee in 1999. Again, I know it sounds like it's a really old film, but it's not dated at all, simply because these kids are the same kids who are, kids are kids. We're going to be approaching spelling bees in the same academic manner. And the personalities are so diverse and so charming and so enjoyable to watch. Like, you really get to know these kids and you really get to root for all of them. You might have a favorite, but you don't want anybody to fail, which I guess is kind of the nature of a spelling bee. There's always just one, or I suppose two winners, but for the most part. Uh, but it is really entertaining, and you get to see how these kids approach learning and how they approach the process of getting to know some of these gigantic words that I certainly couldn't even begin to try and spell. Um, and it's really fun to see how the adults interact with the kids, how the adults that are part of the spelling bee are used to seeing certain practices happen time after time after time. And it's really like watching a sporting event, which generally I don't think of when I think of the spelling bee. Um, and that's as someone who enjoyed spelling bees as a child. So it's just a really fun, um, albeit odd movie. And even when you have the personalities that are a little bit more off the beaten path, you still love them, you still enjoy them. And I think that's one of the great points about Spellbound. So if you're looking for something a little bit off the beaten path, Spellbound, definitely check it out. It's a definite winner. My last recommendation for CleveNet Overdrive is for a film that covers a topic that is very much near and dear to my heart. And it's called Films of Fury. Now, Films of Fury is a documentary all about history and contemporary nature of martial arts movies. And I've been a huge martial arts cinema fan my entire life. I remember growing up and watching tons of like Jackie Chan films and Sammo Hung, Jet Li, and this does a great job of referencing their work, but also sort of not over revering their what they do. It talks about the technical aspects of things. It talks about when stunts go wrong. It talks about everything that goes into perfect choreography. And I really, really enjoyed watching how, things have shifted from, say, like, generation of Bruce Lee to today's contemporary martial artists and the films that they're in, you know, and it's just a really interesting history, and it jet sets from all over the place, from East Asia to like London to the United States to, all of these other places, and how martial arts cinema really is quite pervasive in that nature. It's not just one place anymore. Uh, so this is really, really, really fun, especially if you like action movies, if you like fight choreography. Definitely check this out. It's 100% worth a watch, and it's absolutely fascinating when they delve into the history of martial arts movies. So make sure you check it out. Films of Fury, also on CleveNet's Overdrive. Now, as usual, our second set of recommendations are all from Hoopla Digital, and the very first one is going to be Geek and You Shall Find. Geek and You Shall Find is a really interesting trek through the comic book and graphic novel industry. It follows primarily a couple of filmmakers who, after encountering some fans of comic books at some of these different conventions, decide to go on this journey where they really delve into the graphic novel world. And it's great because it gets the perspective of these filmmakers, but it also gets the perspective of the fans themselves, as well as some huge names in comic book and genre fiction, like Stan Lee and, say, George R.R. Martin. People who are very much present in the industry and who are hugely respected, and who have been in the industry for a very, very long period of time. So you get all of these different layers of opinions. And I have to say, as much as I love hearing people like George R. R. Martin and Stan Lee speak, I loved hearing about the fans and their perspectives. It was really kind of eye-opening as far as um, the things that brought them to graphic novels. And that's from someone who enjoys graphic novels as well. You know, just hearing other fans talk about it was really, really kind of fascinating. Um, it also sort of tracks the history of these different stories, you know, the origins of different characters, what those characters meant, because there's actually a ton of um, pop culture lore and legend, but then there's also some real relevance in the real world that comes into play when you have certain characters do certain things because they're so popular and because so many people follow them. So that was a really, really interesting topic to be covered as well. So if you're interested in graphic novels, or if you're not a fan of graphic novels but you're kind of curious as to why so many people are, Geek and You Shall Find is definitely a really great film that you should check out. So on Hoopla Digital, check out Geek and You Shall Find. My next recommendation for Hoopla is a marvelously odd but wondrously charming documentary called Chicken People. Now, Chicken People follows a handful of chicken show people. I don't even know how to precisely refer to them. Like with people who do dog shows and cat shows, they're like cat fanciers. So would they be chicken fanciers? In any case, while that specific term is not covered, these people are amazing, and I had no idea that chickens had shows in this way. Of course, I knew that there were like 4-H shows. I mean, I come from Milan, Ohio. I was a part of 4-H system. You know, you get blue ribbons and things like that. Absolutely. But these chickens are hardcore show chickens. Like, they get fancy like hairstyles, and it's funny but so sweet at the same time. These are very clearly their pets in a lot of ways that I treat my cat, or you might treat your dog. These are their babies, and I'd never seen chicken personality come across so well as when watching this. And of course, the personalities of the people who are breeding and showing these chickens is quite amazing as well. It's kind of like the equivalent of Best in Show. If you've seen the Christopher Guest movie Best in Show, kind of the equivalent, except 100% a documentary and not a fictionalized version of one. I had so much fun when watching this. I can't recommend it enough. It probably, of all the films I watched, was my favorite. So please do, if you're looking for something that is heartwarming but also laugh-inducing, Chicken People is definitely the way to go. Check it out on Hoopla Digital. My very last Hoopla Digital recommendation is for a fascinating documentary featuring the typewriter called California Typewriter. Now, this documentary interviews, you know, collectors, artists, famous actors like Tom Hanks, musicians like John Mayer, people in general who all have a bit of an obsession with the classic American typewriter. They're not necessarily Luddites, they're not people who hate technology, they're just people who love sort of, I believe, what I think is the romance of the old school typewriter. Something entirely manual that you are powering, that you are in charge of the motion for. And it is a really interesting documentary to watch, just because I'm so connected to, say, my computer or my iPad or all of this tech around me. And I think it's the same way that those of us who are really interested in planning or other modes of physical note-taking approach that's the same thing. And it was really interesting to listen to the reasons why, say, a John Mayer will want to use a typewriter rather than his phone to take down, you know, lyric notes. Um, why David McCullough much prefers to write on a typewriter than he would on his Mac, or why Sam Shepard still, while he recognizes tech and its importance, also recognizes that he is much more connected to this earlier, more low tech version of creativity. When you get to listen to the artists that are using all of these components and how they're so connected to all of these gears and all of these little bits and pieces, um, it's, from an artistic standpoint, really fascinating because it's drawing both creativity with this very technical speak that he's using. I can't say enough great things about California Typewriter. It just has so many different approaches and it talks to so many different people. It's just a really fun, fascinating documentary. And just in general, I loved hearing all of the stories that people had to share about this one very simple object. Well, what we most of us would consider a very simple object compared to now. So if you're having a fit for something nostalgic, if you want to see artists and creative types talk about something they're really passionate about, please do check out California Typewriter. It's an excellent option for you. Okay, my very last couple of recommendations are, of course, going to come from our Canopy service, and the first of those recs is for a documentary called Geek Girls, The Hidden Half of Fan Culture. Now, Geek Girls is part of a creative project that was made about women by women, which obviously I can 100% get behind. A lot of these projects were really, really cool. If you click on the links within the Geek Girls homepage website, you'll actually get to see several other projects that were similarly geared. So please do check that out as well. Anyway, Geek Girls follows the female fan base of a lot of geek pop culture topics, things like cosplay, video gaming, different technology topics, things that, nerd are considered part of nerd culture in general. It talks to women who have been a part of that culture for decades at this point, but it also sort of talks to people who are just sort of diving in. And it talks about, in large part, ways that women have had to sort of make their own niches within these already subcultures simply because they were so male dominated for so many years. And then how these sort of shifts have had to happen over time, and how, women are becoming more forward in a lot of these different genres of geekiness, I suppose you could say. Say, like in the professional video gaming world, for years and years, that has been a very male-dominated thing. And now a lot of women are really starting to rise up in the ranks, which is really exciting to see. But it's also interesting to hear how their experiences in these worlds have been. So it's a fascinating documentary as far as perspective goes. It's also just really interesting to see how creative some of these women have been in making places for themselves in culture realms that just didn't have a place for them originally. Say like the cosplay world, how that's built over the years. I actually really, really found this one interesting, so I do hope people will check it out. I think it's got a worthwhile message as well. Plus, I just really like a lot of the different genres and fandoms that are focused in on these in general. So please check out Geek Girls, The Hidden Half of Fan Culture, available on Canopy. And finally, my very last recommendation was for a documentary I wasn't even going to pay attention to at first because I had no interest whatsoever in the topic. But after watching it, I really, I feel I have much more of an understanding of the fandom. It's called A Brony Tale, Exploring an Unusual Fandom. Bronies, for people who don't know, are young men from, I believe, according to the documentary, the age of childhood to around their 30s or mid 30s who are big fans of the new My Little Pony series. Um, I'd heard the term brony before. I was familiar with what that group was, um, but not being a My Little Pony fan, uh, it just wasn't something that was on my radar. I am always for being a fan of anything that you want. So I'd not really thought, there's anything negative about being a brony, but I definitely understand where negative connotations might come into play. This documentary does an exceptional job of really, I think, clearing up a lot of that negative feeling about um, adults who may like what a lot of people consider a genre of art that's too childish. I am a huge animation fan. I have always been a huge animation fan. And I can absolutely respect people who are fans of animation as well. And this is just another subset of that. It also really explained the whole My Little Pony fan base to me in general. Again, I had not been a big fan of My Little Pony. I wasn't a fan of My Little Pony in the 80s when it was big the first time around. So hearing the discussion about like how it champions friendships and things like that, I really can understand a little bit better about fandom in general. But it really does focus in on the brony subset. And it was really, really kind of a fun watch. It follows a voice actress who also was not at all familiar with these fandoms and suddenly was thrown into the deep end, as you can guess. And she really grew to love and appreciate the fan base because it's just such an earnest one, I mean, who wouldn't love the idea of strong friendships being something that we all need in that kind of connection. So if you're looking for sort of a heartwarming, eye-opening documentary, please do check out A Brony Tale Exploring an Unusual Fandom. It is very sweet and funny and hilarious in places and just sort of heartwarming in others. So please do check that out. That's my last recommendation for the week. As always, if you have recommendations for films that you are watching and that you think other people should be watching, please make a comment and let us know. We all love movies, so we always are looking for recommendations. If you have a recommendation for a topic that you'd like to see covered on Film Rec Friday in the future, please comment with that as well. I'm always looking for new ideas, so I would definitely appreciate that. In any case, I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and I will see you again next week. See you later. Bye.